Toronto homeowners are struggling to sell their homes because there are nearly 20,000 on the market. The latest article on BlogTO talked about that. And if you watched our last video talking about the market stats for January 2025, you would have a lot more insight into what that article talks about. But they did come out with the article. Let's break it down, talk about what's actually happening in the market. And I'm going to show you one of the stats that is probably the most surprising and something that you need to see moving forward into the spring market. Feels like every week we are getting new articles talking about the market stats that came out in January 2025. And if you did watch the last two on my channel, we talked about various elements that weren't actually discussed in these articles. When we break down what's actually happening in the Toronto real estate market, there are so many micro markets and segments that are super important to go through so that you know exactly what you're looking for and what exactly is happening in the market that you're thinking about. And this article on BlogTO was just released, and it's been shared on social media hundreds and hundreds of times. In fact, it was shared to me several times. So I figured I'm just going to make a video and talk about what exactly does this mean and why it's important to break down the details of the article. Right here on BlogTO, Toronto owners struggle to sell their homes as nearly 20,000 sit on the market. And what they're referring to in this article is this little chart here, which is the stats for home sales across the greater Toronto area. We're going to emphasize that because we're going to take a look at that greater Toronto area shortly in January, courtesy of the Toronto Regional Real Estate Board. Sales in 2025 were down from last year, 3,847 versus 4,177. That's about an 8% drop year over year in January. New listings at 12,000, basically 400. That's up from 8,000, basically 300 and change. About a 48% increase in new listings and active listings. And this is where they're getting their number from, 17,157. Now, I know it's not 20,000 like the article said. It's still a good amount of listings, but definitely not 20,000. In fact, going from there to 20,000 is like basically a 12% increase from the number that was actual for the month. Nevertheless, that's a 70% increase from January of 2024. Average price, though, this is interesting, was up 1.5% year over year to $1,040,000. I'd argue that's basically flat and definitely seasonal as we've gone through. Average days on market, the same at 37, and average property days on market as well, 55. So basically flat across the board. Let's take a look at what exactly the greater Toronto area market is. And this actually might surprise you. So I pulled this photo from the Toronto Regional Real Estate Board map, and you can actually just type this into Google and take a look. This is the area that they are actually talking about for that article. So even though Toronto is this little portion here, they're actually talking about properties out here in Newtonville, Clarington, Bowmanville, up here in Port Perry, Scugog, Uxbridge, East Gwillimbury, New Tecumseh, Caledon, Inglewood, Halton Hills, Scotch Block, Silver Creek, Milton, Oakville, Mississauga, Pickering, Ajax, Whitby, Oshawa, Markham, Richmond Hill, Vaughan, and of course, Toronto. And the reason I wanted to bring this up is that this is a massive area of land. And if you were to consider the city of Toronto versus these areas, driving from downtown Toronto right here where CO1 is, this is basically where the CN Tower is, where this cursor is, to give or take Clarington, you're looking at around a 2-hour drive without traffic. So it's not exactly a super great comparable to compare those two markets. One thing we should break down for this video is what exactly this looks like from a numbers perspective. So I figured I'd just do that for you. And here are what those actual numbers look like from an active listing standpoint. In fact, if you go back to essentially September of 2024, we were over 25,000 active listings, 25,600 to be exact. And while that did drop off into the holidays, we've started to see that number increase into January. And that's where around that 17,000 listings mark. If we take a look at January 2024, and this is the difference January to January, you are seeing definitely an increase in listings, but we are nowhere near where we were in the summer of 2024. But I thought it would be important because I did select all the areas of the greater Toronto area here, and there are a ton. And just wanted to give you an example. If I click here on Durham, it does bring up all of these pockets here, and we can either isolate based on city location, but for this video, I thought it'd be more interesting just to update by property type so that you can actually see what percentages of property types are taking up those 17,000 active listings. So if we take a look at property type and we click on detached, and detached is certainly one of the most desired areas in the greater Toronto area, especially in the city of Toronto, you're looking at just over 6,000 listings across those 17,000. So if you're looking for a detached property, basically 1 in 3 on the market right now are detached. And when you start to get outside the city core of Toronto, a lot of those cities do have detached properties compared to the downtown core, of course. If we take a look at semi-detached, the hottest property in the city of Toronto, and of course it's going to be hot because overall there are about 749 active semi-detached properties across the entire greater Toronto area. And I'm sure if we isolated for just the city of Toronto, that number would be even less. We are seeing the hottest areas of the city get multiple offers on these semi-detached properties, and that's going to continue into the spring market. Taking a look at townhouses and row houses, and this is an important one to consider because that is a pretty hot sector of the market as well. Basically, that's the step up between condo and semi-detached. So if you can't quite get to the semi, a townhouse is a really viable option there. You're looking at just over 1,000 listings, basically almost 1,100, and condo townhouses, which is maybe a segment just a touch below that. Again, about 1,100 active listings there, 1,168, for example. Now, taking a look at condos, and these are a big bulk of that 17,000 active listings. You are looking at around, give or take, 6,000. So 6,000 detached, 6,000 condos. Basically, 2/3 of the 17,000 active listings on the market are either condos or detached properties. And for the city of Toronto, mostly condos. For the cities outside of the city of Toronto, mostly those detached properties. I hope that cleared up that article from BlogTO and what exactly they are referring to, which is a quite misleading article. We are not at 20,000 active listings as of yet. We may get there in future months, but not quite yet. And we did surpass that back in the fall. By the way, if you were interested in making a move in 2025, want to know what's actually happening, and if you did want a more in-depth look into the market you are considering making a move in, whether you're a buyer or a seller in 2025, you can click on that first link down below or scan the QR code and book directly into my calendar for a spring market session. Let's talk about what's actually happening in the market that you are interested in, because relying on these articles from BlogTO will give you a lot of information that may not be relevant for you. I'm Michael Ouzas. Thanks for watching.